All right, we're recording this session for those people that can't make it. So thanks very much everyone for joining in person. I am your solo host, Keir Bowden, for the second time without my erstwhile partner in crime, Clive Platt. He didn't change his mind, he didn't decide to come back to us, so you are stuck with me, I'm afraid. So here's the topics that we'll be covering today. If you do have any questions, please post them to the chat or the questions, and I'll get to those at the end rather than during the presentation. Yeah, I won't go through all of these things. I'm sure you can all read as well as I can. Just note the questions is at the end. So first off, our usual first topic, fond farewells. So the features that have retired or are about to retire. So the big one is the first one, I would say. Starting in winter 23, you won't be able to create any new workflow rules. The only exception to that is developer editions for packaging purposes. So basically everything in Flow going forward is the best advice that I can give you. The Pardot Classic app retires in just under a week on the 17th of October. So what's that, next Monday? That's been coming for a while and we've mentioned it a few times. There is a replacement for it, so there should be no issue with upgrading. If you're still running any of the old Lightning on tablet applications, so the old Salesforce one that used to run on there, at one point in time there was a single column application, those will be retiring in spring 23, which was scheduled for around February next year. So going forward you need to use the Lightning experience on iPad OS is the only supported tablet application. So legacy APIs up to version 20 retired a couple of weeks ago, and everything up to and including version 30 will be retiring in summer 23, which is scheduled to land in June 2023. This is something you probably want to take a look at because it was, from memory, API version 28 where the requirements changed around test methods. Initially, they could be co-located with Apex, and then API version 28, they had to be in their own classes. So if you've got anything pre-28, you'll have to do some work to move those out into their own classes so they're valid in API version 31, which will be the earliest one that's supported come this June. Obviously, if that's something that's of a concern to you, then please feel free to reach out to your friendly service manager. And also Salesforce or Outlook is retiring, but not until June 24, so you've got a good sort of 18 months to worry about that one. Next up, a couple of general updates. The usual on browser support. It's the standard stuff. It's the latest Chrome, Edge Chromium, Firefox, and Safari, along with Safari on iPad OS for the tablet version. Classic is much the same. The iPad OS isn't supported. And IE11 is still clinging on for a couple more months, but it's scheduled to be end of life in December 2022. So you've literally only got a couple more months to use that and you should really get off of it, to be honest. Multi-factor authentication enforcement is coming. So it's been a contractual requirement to have multi-factor authentication enabled since February this year, but it's not been enforced and it's not been turned on for you. But sometime in the first half of 2023, which is all the release notes say, this will be automatically enabled. So everyone will need to use multi-factor authentication to log in. And at the end of towards the end of 2023, so I'd imagine around this time, really, maybe slightly earlier, it'll be enforced for all direct logins to Salesforce. So you do need to get on top of that if you're not there already. Again, if this is an issue for you, please feel free to reach out to your friendly service manager. Custom address fields, you may remember these from our last webinar where they were in beta and we were very pleased to see them. It clearly went well, so this is now available generally. It requires state and country pick lists, sorry, state and territory pick lists to be enabled. If you don't have it already, then when you create a custom address field, it will be turned on automatically, but that won't affect standard address fields, so it'll only be turned on for the bits that you need to use it for. Something to bear in mind, especially if you're a bit field poor, if you're getting near to your org limits on the number of custom fields you can have in an S object, this counts as 9 fields from your per object allowance. So it's like a custom address field. It actually breaks down into 9 fields and consumes that from the limit. So there's 8 for the actual component, the usual stuff: street, city, postal code, country code. There's also 1 internal, which seems a bit harsh that it's consuming your allowance, but I'm guessing that's because those limits are actually hard limits, so it doesn't really matter who caused a field to be consumed. Once it's consumed, that's gone from the limit. There's no way for Salesforce to hide that. You cannot convert any other custom field type to an address field, which shouldn't be a great surprise, because there's very little that would map to that, and 8 different fields. And it's not supported in quite a few scenarios. There are far too many to list here, so you can read all about them at the short link shown. Don't worry about capturing this. We'll send out the recording, and we also post details of whether you can get hold of the slide deck as well. Next topic, analytics. You can now collaborate on Salesforce reports and dashboards in Slack, assuming you have the CRM Analytics app for Slack app installed and the appropriate licenses. Users require the Connect Salesforce with Slack permission and permission to subscribe to reports and dashboards. And once all that's in place, you can browse, you can search, and you can share reports and dashboards directly from Slack. You can also subscribe to up to 7 reports or dashboards directly from Slack, again via the CRM Analytics for Slack app. So what happens when you subscribe to those is they refresh on a schedule and they post a snapshot to Slack with the details. Interesting that a lot of the Slack innovations at the moment seem to be about stopping you from logging into Salesforce, which I find a bit interesting, because I would have expected them to want you to go to Salesforce, but hey ho. You can now view custom report type details at creation time, rather than building a report and then realizing you picked the wrong one, or you haven't quite got the information that you need. So in the screen grab here, you can see the objects in the report type. Not the greatest screen grab, sorry about that, but you can see the objects are there and how they are joined into that report. Analytics Home has some additional filtering and browsing options to help you find what you're trying to get hold of faster. So you click the Browse tab, that opens you the Browse in the main panel. You can choose what you want, or you can choose everything as shown in the 2. And then you've got secondary filters marked with a 3 to help you narrow down the result. So when you've got an awful lot of dashboards and reports, as most of us have with mature orgs, this is a way of allowing you to kind of browse and filter those rather than having to know exactly where it's stored and how to get to it. Next topic is customization. Dynamic forms have support for additional objects, so person accounts, contacts, and opportunities. I don't know about you, I find this quite annoying the way it's being drip fed out, but apparently these various object types are owned by different teams and they're adding support at their own pace, so this is going to continue coming at their own rate of knots. And also dynamic related lists, you can now apply filters to those on multiple values from a single pick list. So rather than having to have, previously, if you wanted to show opportunities in prospecting or discovery state, you had to have 2 different dynamic lists, dynamic related lists, one for prospecting, one for discovery. Now you can filter on that and say, if it's in prospecting or discovery, I want to show it in this single list. So that might get you some lists back if you've been using that mechanism. There's a release update that's going to be enforced in winter 23 that adds the ability to set expiration dates on permission set and permission set group assignments. This is also going to enable the enhanced user interface, because you need that in order to be able to set those dates. And if anyone's used the permissions helper app back in the day, that's been renamed to user access and permissions assistant. If you haven't used it before, it's a nice app exchange package that allows you to report on permission set assignments, manage permission set groups. Quite neat, and adds kind of quite a lot of functionality that the Salesforce UI is probably currently missing. This does require the tooling API to be enabled for the app though. You can now enable scoping rules in Performance and Unlimited Edition. So if you were on our previous release webinar, you'll recall this required signature success and a program architect assigned to your account for Salesforce to enable it, which I've never seen before, so that took me quite by surprise. So I'm guessing that was because they thought there was maybe going to be some issues with it, or there's a lot of manual setup and configuration required. So anyway, those requirements have now been removed, and you don't even need to contact Salesforce support. If you didn't attend the last webinar, scoping rules allow users to be shown a reduced set of records for specific objects by default, rather than everything in the system, so that they can focus on the records they need to based on some filter criteria. And talking of the filter criteria, scoping and restriction rules now support multiple values in a rule. These will be string literals or record IDs, and they must be comma separated. At the moment, you can have individual values that have commas in them as well. So if you have one of those, you'll need to unquote it. So put it inside double quotes, or it will be interpreted as multiple values and your filter criteria will not behave as you expected it to. The data loader has a new home. Instead of downloading it from setup, you need to go to the address shown here at the developer portal, and you can download it from there. And also, authorization via OAuth from the browser is enabled by default, but if that doesn't work for you, you can disable it via the settings option on the settings menu. So settings, and then deselect the enable OAuth login from browser option. Settings, then disable the enabled checkbox. Change sets have a couple of new elements for Lightning Web Runtime experiences. Digital Experience, which is a component from a Lightning Web Runtime experience, and Digital Experience Bundle, which is the whole thing. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the experiences section. Next up, my favorite topic, development. Lightning Web Components now have feature parity, I think, with standard JavaScript pop-ups, with the introduction of the modal component, allowing us to create custom modals. In a change of pace from the previously released alert type pop-ups, you extend the Lightning modal component through JavaScript, and then you use the Lightning modal subcomponents in markup. So in the little snippet shown here, you can see the extension of Lightning modal, which has been imported from lightning/modal, and then in the markup it's lightning-modal-body, and there are other ones for header and footer. If you try and use this on pre-release orgs, it hadn't been released over the weekend. I haven't checked in the last couple of days to see if it's finally made it in there. So if you're trying to play with it, you might find that you can't get access to it just yet, but it's on its way. Lightning Web Components are now better at detecting invalid HTML syntax, but right now all they'll do is give you warnings in the JavaScript web console rather than block your deployment, stop using the component, or giving a big fat error to the user. However, this may change in the future, and if it does, it will stop your component from loading. It detects loads of things now, so again, I haven't tried to list those, just follow the short link and you can see the details in the standard release notes. Also, Lightning Web Security, which is the new mechanism for security that beats out the locker service for Lightning Web Components, that is now going to be enabled by default in new orgs, but if it causes a problem, you can disable it. In Apex, the query cursor limits have been removed. So there's no maximum concurrent query cursors per user, which used to be 10. And this also applies to batch Apex. So there's no limit to the number of cursors that are currently in progress for start, execute, or finish methods. And also the cursors and their related query results are now available for 2 days rather than the 15 minutes. So you've got a little bit of time to do something with those. Continuing on the Apex theme, you can now access the daily async tests limit. If you haven't used this before, this defines the maximum number of Apex classes that can be queued in a 24-hour period. And you can get hold of that by pulling the get all or get map from org limits and then locating the appropriate key. If you haven't encountered this limit before, it's the maximum of 500 or 20 times the number of test classes in the org. So the more test classes, the more runs you'll get. And you can now call invocable actions from Apex as well as Flow. I'd question why you would need to be doing that, because if you've architected your code correctly, your invocable should just be a thin wrapper that delegates off to some Apex somewhere else. So you should be able to call that directly from Apex rather than going through the layer, the invocable layer. But there might be a reason for that. I haven't investigated in great detail. Next, platform events. You can now apply filters to a platform event stream so that you only receive events that match the filter you've applied. This only applies to custom high volume events and only Comet D subscriptions, so you can't use it in triggers, flows, or processes, which sadly is exactly where I want to use it, but such is life. For Comet D and streaming API clients, you can also group multiple platform events into a single channel rather than maintaining multiple subscriptions. And that's quite a nice feature actually, because they can proliferate if you've got a number of channels. And you can also now monitor the usage of platform events from setup by searching for platform events. Process automation. So this is something I'm quite pleased about. Omni Studio is now available as its own product rather than requiring you to purchase an industry cloud and getting it sort of off the back of that. If you haven't used it before, there's an awful lot to it, so I'm not going to try and cover it all here, but the key features in my view are flex cards, which allow drag and drop construction of Lightning Web Components, OmniScript, which is declarative automation of process, but in more of a scripting mode than the drag and drop kind of builder that Flow is. And also data raptors, which allow you to access data from Salesforce or from external systems for use by your flex cards and scripts. And it's really quite powerful. I'm quite impressed with that. In my view, this does require a little more technical knowledge than Flow. A lot of the time I've found you need to be comfortable working with JavaScript object notation to either build queries or define filters and things like that. So yeah, a little bit more techie than Flow, but still very much aimed at low code rather than pro code. Moving on to Salesforce Flow. Screen flows can now be embedded directly in Lightning Web Components using the new standard Lightning-Flow component as shown in this code snippet. Just give it the API name and it'll appear within your component. As is always the case, Flow Builder has a number of enhancements in this release. They've had years and years of investment and they seem to be still riding that wave. You can now cut and paste elements when you're running an auto layout mode. Previously, you had to copy and paste and then go back and delete the old component. You don't need to do that now, the old element rather. The enhanced formula builder is now available for flow resources and the collection filter element. So if you found you've been held back the standard formula builder, things might get better for you. Record triggered flows can now determine if they were invoked as part of a clone operation, and they can also, which I think is really useful, make updates to related records rather than just the record that triggered the flow, which a lot of the time is what you want to do with a record triggered anything, is go and hit some other things. So that's getting it closer to feature parity with triggers, I would say. Two-column layouts are now ignored. So if you've got any elements that you want to use two-column layouts or more, you should replace those with the section element or section component, because that gives you a lot more flexibility. And you can now filter pick lists by record type based on dynamic forms for flow elements. So if you've got one of those somewhere, you can filter the pick lists that are shown to make sure you're only showing the appropriate ones that are defined for that record type. There's more screen real estate in the Flow Builder, as it now has a larger screen editor and you can show or hide the toolbox as you desire. And also, as you can hopefully see in this screen grab, the Flow Builder, when you add an element, it's now got a little search box to help you find the element you want faster rather than having to scroll through the myriad elements that are available. Flow testing is generally available now. This is fairly basic, so I wouldn't get overly excited, but it's absolutely a step in the right direction to have a low-code way of creating unit tests to confirm the behavior and allow you to refactor with confidence. Something to note on that is that record delete flows aren't currently supported by tests. The lookup component now supports selection of multiple values. I think that's really nice. Shame the standard lookup doesn't do that within Salesforce. And you just set the maximum selection value greater than 1, and then you'll be able to choose more than 1. And as I mentioned earlier, no new workflow rules can be created aside from developer editions for packaging. Next topic is experiences, which, as we all know, formerly known as communities, formerly known as portals, been through a few name changes, but it's currently experiences, sometimes digital experiences. So I mentioned the new change set components, and those basically come out of the enhanced sites and content platform. So this is a new platform that combines the Salesforce content management system and the Lightning Web runtime. So this is the first one that enables partial deployment. It gives you site content search, and it makes content management easier because you've got a CMS behind it. You can tell if an experience or site is using this platform because there'll be an enhanced badge on the appropriate page. So in this case, you can see that we've got a couple of CMS workspaces that have got the little lightning symbol in enhanced. That means they're running on the enhanced site and content platform. Some improvements to other sites, LWC or Aura. There's a new orchestration work item list component. So if you're using Flow Orchestrator, you can have steps assigned, which are steps are basically work, things you want them to do. You can assign those to licensed site visitors. You drop this component onto your site pages, and those licensed users will be able to see and progress their assigned work items. Lightning Web Runtime sites, you can adjust horizontal padding. You've been able to do that vertical for a while, but now you can do horizontal as well. And the grid component can show record list views and CMS collections depending on what type of Lightning Web Runtime platform you're using. As shown, if they're regular Lightning Web Runtime, you can see list views. If it's the enhanced platform, you can do list views and CMS collections because the enhanced platform includes a CMS. Note that this just pulls the data in and provides tools like pagination. It doesn't actually render anything. You still need to use a display component like image, tile, or card in order to actually display the data. You can now display a custom banner on your Aura or Lightning Web Component site. Quite nice, I think, this one. You can use the site banner, and this will display for guests and unlicensed users. And licensed users, but you will need to enable customer incident service management. So that's where this is really coming from, the ability to put a banner up to show there is a major incident that all your customers need to worry about. And you also need to enable broadcast site banners for that to appear. And as mentioned earlier, Lightning Web Security is enabled by default in new orgs, but that will only impact Lightning Web Components. If you've got an Aura site that incorporates Lightning Web Components, the Aura aspects of it will still be secured through the locker service. And there's a couple of performance improvements for digital experiences. Cached images for guest users are now repurposed rather than fetched anew to suit the device. And micro batching is now available for authenticated users who need to create a bunch of records at once. Weirdly, this was available for guest users first, which is an unusual step, but hey ho. And there's options for both declarative and programmatic record creation to be able to do that in batches. Moving on to Sales Cloud. Collaborative forecasting continues to receive enhancements. You can now create up to 5 custom calculated columns per forecast type, and you can decide which forecast to focus on by filtering on custom opportunity fields. Territory-based forecast types can now be viewed in Salesforce Mobile, and if you adjust a forecast, you can give a little bit more information about why you did that, as you've got an input which is 255 characters, whereas that was previously 140. Pipeline inspection now includes Einstein Deal Insights. So this covers conversation and email insights and includes suggested actions, and it allows you to choose which insights you want to show. So when you turn it on, you'll be asked which things you're interested in surfacing to your inspectors. Pipeline inspection also allows you to summarize metrics with number or currency fields. Previously, it was the amount field and that was your lot. So you can now use other fields, but this doesn't happen by default. You need to configure the fields that you want to appear via pipeline inspection setup page, and then you choose the summary field via the metric settings. You can also update the amount field in line. This is for opportunities without products only, as when there are products, the amount is calculated from the price and the quantity of the products, so you can't just go changing the top level. And you can find out if the amount field is editable by hovering over it, and if you see a pencil icon, that means you're good to go. If not, then you can't. To-do list next. This is a new feature around activities, and this shows all tasks that are assigned to you. It allows you to apply labels to tasks to categorize the items, and then you can pick a category to focus on. This is surfaced through a utility bar component, as shown here, and you will need to add that to each application, each Lightning application that you want to use that in. Not available for Classic, obviously, because it's a Lightning side of things. Some email changes. Users can now use org-wide email addresses to send list emails. However, they should realize that if they do that, replies will go to that address as well, not to them. You can now access Email Composer from custom components, because programmatically you can generate a page reference and then navigate to that. And we've mentioned before around verification of email addresses. So once per release cycle, there is a requirement to verify the email addresses that emails are being sent from. So when this is required, you'll receive an email with a link to click to verify that you still own the address. Shouldn't take too long, I wouldn't have thought. A couple of other Sales Cloud items. The Einstein lead and opportunity scoring models are now updated once a month rather than every 10 days. I'd imagine this reflects the fact that they aren't really changing that dramatically now. There's a ton of data in there, and this is effective as of now. And Sales Cloud for Slack is now generally available. Again, like I mentioned before, most of the recent Slack announcements, this allows you to access and collaborate on Salesforce records from inside Slack rather than logging into Salesforce. And you can also, on the Salesforce side, invoke Slack actions from Salesforce Flow in response to events. So, for example, you can have some automation that when a new opportunity is created or a new case is created, you create a Slack channel on demand, and people are invited in there to collaborate. Next up, Service Cloud. Swarm in Slack is now generally available. So this allows you to loop in the appropriate experts when a case or a customer service incident is raised. You can report on how effective that collaboration was. And also, which I think is quite a nice feature, you can swarm more than once on the same record if it becomes apparent there's more effort required. I think that's quite important. A lot of the time it feels like a case is solved and then you find another user raises something in a slightly different scenario, gives you another problem, so you can swarm back on that again. There's guided setup available for this, but essentially it boils down to turn on swarming, grant users access to the appropriate object types, set up the service console, and then configure any flow automation you want around this. So make sure you have those skills available when you turn this on. And a few new features for messaging. You can define a wrap-up time to allow reps to send follow-up emails and update case notes. There's emoji support for in-app and web messaging. So you click the emoji icon, choose the one you want to add. And users can now see an estimated wait time when they're waiting to chat to an agent. You need to be routing via Flow, and your agent needs to have accepted at least 10 messaging requests in the last 10 minutes to provide the required data that allows the estimate to happen. Otherwise, they won't see it. There's a couple of new message notifications. So if you've scrolled back into a conversation, there's a mechanism to jump to the most recent message, or if a new message comes in, you'll get notified about that and can jump straight to it. Email to case, you can now route via omni-channel flow rather than, as was the case, requiring a record trigger flow to make that happen. Duplicate file attachments in email to case can now be removed. So if you've got someone with, like mine really, I'm thinking about it, with an email signature with loads of images in it, if you enable eliminate duplicate email attachments, you'll only get one copy of that, and the responses will get filtered out. And the Apex 10-minute processing limit is now enforced on email to case, but if this starts causing you a problem, you can contact Salesforce support and they can adjust it for you. Einstein case classification is now available in Flow. This automatically classifies new cases and routes them to the correct queue. You have to use the apply case classification recommendations action if your screen is wide enough to display that and allow you to see it. And the article and reply recommendations value dashboards allow you to see how these features are performing, their estimated ROI, etc. So if you're interested in seeing that, these are app exchange packages that you need to install. So this brings us to the end of our scheduled programming. Now it's time to look ahead at what's coming up in the next few releases that we're getting a beta peak of in winter 23. Reminder that beta is a separate agreement. It may never go live. Only make purchases and decisions based on existing functionality, but look ahead and get excited about what might be coming. So I'm really keen on this one. This is basically you can configure field level security against permission sets rather than against profiles, as part of any standard field level security operation. So you have to turn this on via setup user management, and the very long name there, field level security for permission sets during field creation beta. And then basically pretty much when you carry out anything related to field level security, you'll see a list of permission sets rather than profiles, and much easier to manage if you've decided to standardize on profiles, which is a good idea. If you need to switch back, you can just disable the feature and the profiles will appear again. Lightning App Builder now allows you to clone an application. So you click the clone app setting, which appear, you have to turn on that, the clone apps beta. And then you'll see the clone option in the drop down for an application. And then you provide the specifics of your clone in much the same way you would creating a new one. And away you go. You'll be able to ride off the back of somebody else's hard work. However, note that the utility bar aspect of the application will not be cloned. You'll have to add that manually afterwards. Data Weave in Apex is in developer preview. So for anyone who doesn't know, Data Weave is a MuleSoft thing, and the key thing for Apex is that it allows you to process CSV files in a manner that doesn't require you to write the whole thing from scratch, like we have done for about 10 or 12 years now. This is in developer preview. It's not in beta yet, so that you want to use this out of a developer edition. But basically allows your MuleSoft Data Weave scripts to be deployed as metadata and executed from Apex. So what's just popped up there is an example of a Data Weave script that processes a CSV file and maps the lines to a Salesforce contact record. And here's how you'd execute it from Apex. This is just a test environment, so it's just created a simple string with one entry, runs the Data Weave script, creates script, that has the name of CSV to contact, so that's the name of the script on the left-hand side, executes it, gets the results, verifies that they're correct, pulls them back in the right fashion, etc. So previously, I mean, I've lost track of how many attempts there have been to process CSV files on platform. They've been done in Apex, they've been done in JavaScript in the past. However, this might not be a silver bullet because it does run on the Salesforce infrastructure and it is subject to the same the standard transaction heap and CPU limits. So yeah, it might not work out exactly for you if it's a huge file. Code Builder is now in open beta. So essentially this is a full VS Code development environment in the cloud, accessible via browser, including, which is the key thing, the Salesforce CLI pre-installed and pre-authenticated to your developer hub. And you can read more about that at my blog post at the short link shown, because I was on the closed beta, which I was very pleased to be on. Another developer, kind of more developer-y focused, but also low code focused, DevOps Center. So this is now in open beta. If you haven't come across this before, it allows declarative deployment without change sets. So you get all the benefits of version control driven feature development, but you don't have to necessarily know the nitty gritty of using version control. Excuse me. You organize your changes via work items, which the platform automatically tracks what changes have been made to your environment, and then you choose which ones you want to go forward to include into the work item, which under the hood will create a new branch in Git and create a pull request, etc., etc. This currently integrates with GitHub only, I believe. It is intended to integrate with other Git solutions at some point in time, but GitHub is the one that's been targeting now. But it allows you to deploy via clicks. So even if you're collaborating with devs on the repository, it'll all be kept in sync. And you can find out more at the short link shown. One thing to point out is that while it allows you to build all these things without clicks, if you actually have any merge conflicts or anything like that, you are going to need someone who understands how to deal with Git merge conflicts to be able to deal with that. So that really is the end of me talking to you about new features. That's the end of that. Thanks for sticking with us. Only 54 slides this time, so that's not too bad. As usual, there's the Salesforce release readiness site. There's a trailhead badge, there's release notes, there's demo videos, there's release readiness. There's quite a lot of information there as well. And that brings me to the end of the session, and I'll just go and have a look over and see if we've got any questions. Have Salesforce said how they will be automatically enabling with regard to SSO enable orgs? So they have said if you have SSO enabled, they will not be enforcing that side of things. So if you're using single sign-on, they won't be turning on MFA. If you're allowing direct logins, they will be enforcing that. So if you have SSO configured, you will be fine. They will not be trying to do anything with your single sign-on provider. Good question though, well done. And that looks to be it for the questions. Lovely. I do like one I can answer. That's the perfect number. So thank you very much for your time, everyone. Great to see you all. Hope to see you all at the next release webinar, which should be around February of 2023. Have a great day, everyone.